Hi there, my name is Nick Francis. I'm the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer for Brooklyn Vendor Assurance. I'm going to take you through a bit around what a vendor management office is and why we think your company needs one. So a vendor management office and its mission inherently is a function that will be made up of existing vendor managers or any people within your organisation that are specifically there to manage suppliers, and create a team around them that are dedicated to managing vendors, contracts and associated service in a post-contract sense or post-contract award for the duration of the life cycle of that particular deal. They're there to drive adoption and continuous improvement of the vendor management function best practice and the associated processes. They're also to be focused on capturing business value and reduce third-party risk exposure that is sometimes, not always, but can be found as part of the onboarding due diligence that get conducted, owning that and refreshing it on a regular basis. Their responsibilities are not limited to, but include the management of strategic vendors. They need to create and maintain a set of core processes and governance structures like policy to ensure that what the suppliers are providing are delivered in a right and proper manner and that are considered to be fit for purpose. They're there to advise and guide all other roles of how vendors are to be managed effectively and to align the management of said vendors and contracts into a consistent reporting framework from across all business aspects into this centralised unit and reported on. They're there to assure alignment to any regulatory or process or policy best practice that there is, and they take input from various domain experts such as risk, compliance, legal, and factor that into what they do with suppliers on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to show that there's a level of compliance considered. And in that point, to drive up compliance levels to ensure effectiveness of control environment. What that means is to make sure that the controls in place to ensure that suppliers are performing how they need to be against what they've been contracted to do for the business are actually being met. In terms of team structure, it's typical that we'd expect a vendor management office director or a head of vendor management to exist. And under that, there would be a number of vendor managers, one of which or two of which, depending on the size of the function, would be considered a vendor manager lead and to have more of a designer stroke architect type role to continually refine, review and create processes that are needed by the business that underpin any regulation that's in place or policy that's articulated to ensure that's being met. They're then responsible for building, maintaining and operating those on the internal tools and processes that exist. They are governed by a number of functions such as procurement, who will be doing a lot of the sourcing activity, etc. And if this function doesn't live in procurement, it potentially will live in the business lines, maybe matrix managed in terms of that structure. We'll cover a video about operating models later and archetypes, but essentially they will take input from procurement, compliance and legal, risk and the executive in terms of what needs to be done for suppliers and vendor management across the board. They're also then going to link back into the business unit, any company subsidiaries or internal service owners to make sure that on a day-to-day basis, what the suppliers or the vendors in this case are providing is delivering value. The key activities are pretty much to do with maintaining, governing, evolving and communicating everything to do with their supply chain and third-party suppliers. So in this case, ideally the team starts small so it can execute at pace and grows in line with vendors being onboarded at the relevant priority by segment and by category. So by segment we mean by the most critical ones first, or category, the most critical categories first, and then by role, vendor managers, buyers, IT risk and compliance. Critical processes being reviewed across the vendor life cycle. What are they? Are they documented? Are they in place? Also, if you look at the YouTube channel, you will see a video we did in the past around process and policy management. And there was a toolkit around that as how you could measure the quality of your processes and policies. And essentially looking to help from the centre out to the business units and the subsidiaries effectively manage suppliers in a consistent way. The period of which we recommend you can implement a vendor management office is from as little as sort of 8 to 12 weeks. First phase being the idea of landing it, so creating a visibility, a baseline. What does it actually mean as a starting point? How many vendors are managed? How many aren't? What's strategic design for moving forward to growing that to more vendors? How do you communicate out governance? What does governance actually mean? And what does it mean differed by criticality of vendor? establish a basic org structure like the one above, document your core processes, and then define your tools landscape that's going to be used in conjunction with those processes. So once you've done that, you can do the expand bit, which is deploy what is recognized as the Vendor Management Office platform. So that would be the process plus the digital tooling, what the control environment around that is, how do you increase in compliance over time, how many risks are being managed and what risks are being managed, how do you start holding vendors to account, how do they know that they're being held to account and by what means. And then once through that expand phase into evolve, getting to a point of where you're taking cost out and capturing value. So taking any cost out of the operation, capturing more value to give you a spread and a better return on investment, looking at vendor and service and supplier consolidation, and then getting out to your vendors or your suppliers and doing some joint innovation where it makes sense to do so. Ideally, the outcomes and the goals from all of this of having a vendor management function is improved performance across your supply chain, reduced cost, adding value in with each supplier through that joint innovation, etc., reducing risk or the chance of anything untoward happening, increasing compliance if you're regulated and some of the regulations that now need to be complied with, especially in the financial services space, shorter time to market, so the more you do this, the more it's documented, the quicker you'll be able to get value out of the system, increasing your collaboration with your suppliers by making sure that there's regular touch points under that standard governance, and also ultimately increasing revenue of the business, because if you're operating quicker and slicker even with your suppliers, you're going to drive your revenues up as well. Now that was the need for a vendor management office. Please check back in where we go through a lot more around how you'd build it, what the archetypes and the deployment models might be, what the profiles of the individual team members and how to recruit for them is coming shortly. Thank you.
To keep up with the latest Brooklyn vendor assurance news, subscribe here and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Links in the description below.